Welcome to Raaonline. Today's topic of discussion is midbrain. The competency of the topic is identify external and internal features of midbrain, that is to know the external and internal features of midbrain. Describe the internal features of midbrain at the level of superior colliculus as well as inferior colliculus, and describe the anatomical basis and effects of Benedict's and Weber's syndrome. So these are the subheadings: introduction, dimensions, relations, external features in the ventral surface as well as in the dorsal surface, internal features at the level of superior colliculus and inferior colliculus, and clinical correlations. So the introduction, so this is the area for midbrain. So midbrain is a part of brainstem. This is the upper and shortest segment of brainstem. So this is the area of midbrain. This is the inferior surface of the brain. So midbrain connects the forebrain with the hindbrain. So this is the area of brainstem and this is the hindbrain. So this is the medial surface of the cerebral hemisphere and this is the area for midbrain. So the midbrain connects the forebrain with the hindbrain as well as it passes through the tentorial notch. The cavity of the midbrain is known as cerebral aqueduct or aqueduct of Sylvius. The cavity of midbrain is known as aqueduct of Sylvius. It connects the third ventricle with the fourth ventricle. So this is the fourth ventricle and this is the fourth and this is the third ventricle. The cerebral aqueduct is a communicating channel between the third and fourth ventricle. The dimensions are, it is 2.5 centimeter in length as well as 2.5 centimeter in breadth. So in the inferior surface you can appreciate the part of the midbrain. So this is known as crus cerebri. And in the medial surface this is the area for midbrain. So this is the crus cerebri of midbrain. These are the colliculus of midbrain. So that's all about the introduction. Let's see the relations. So the relations on either side, this is already I have told, this is the part of midbrain known as crus cerebri. On either side it is crossed by some structures. So here you can appreciate the tract of optic nerve. So this is optic tract on either side from above downwards. So this is optic tract. Then this is the posterior cerebral artery and this is the superior cerebellar arteries. So on either side it is crossed by optic tract, posterior cerebral artery and superior cerebellar arteries, as well as tinea pontis. It is a white ridge of pons. So these are the structures crossing on either side, and this is the anterior aspect and this is the posterior aspect of the midbrain. So in the anterior aspect you can appreciate these structures present here. So this artery, this is known as basilar artery and this is the mammillary body. So the anterior relations are more or less this area are the anterior relations. So this area is known as interpeduncular fossa. So in the inferior surface this is the area of interpeduncular fossa. In the medial surface this is the area of interpeduncular fossa. So in the anterior relations are the structures forming the floor of interpeduncular fossa. Those are mammillary bodies and tuber cinereum. So this is the area of mammillary body and tuber cinereum, as well as the basilar artery forms the anterior relation. The posterior relations are, so here you can appreciate the splenium of corpus callosum. So the splenium as well as the great cerebral vein, pineal body and the posterior end of thalamus forms the posterior relation. So the posterior relations, splenium of corpus callosum, great cerebral vein, pineal body and the posterior end of thalamus forms the posterior relations. So the lateral relations already I have told, on either side it is crossed by optic tract, posterior cerebral artery, superior cerebellar arteries as well as tinea pontis. So these are the relations of midbrain. Let's see the external features. So it has two surfaces. So this is the ventral surface and dorsal surface. So this is the dorsal surface. Let's see the structures in the ventral surface. So this part is known as crus cerebri. So the crus cerebri is a part of midbrain which is extending from the cerebral cortex. So this is the cerebral cortex. It extends from the cerebral cortex downwards and backwards and reaches the upper part of pons. So this is crus cerebri. On both sides it is known as crura cerebri. So already we have seen the structures crossing the crura cerebri. So it has longitudinal ridges on its superficial aspects. So these grooves are produced by the underlying longitudinal fibers. Okay, so this is the crus cerebri. On medial aspect there is a emergence of oculomotor nerve. So the oculomotor nerve emerging from the medial border of the crus cerebri, it make a sulcus here. From the lateral aspect there is a emergence of trochlear nerve. So this is the trochlear nerve, which is the fourth cranial nerve. So oculomotor is the third cranial nerve. So the cranial nerves emerging from the midbrain are third and fourth cranial nerves. So third nerve from the medial aspect, fourth nerve from the lateral aspect of the crus. But before that the fourth nerve emerges from the dorsal aspect of the midbrain. Then it decussates and comes in the ventral aspect. Right? So these two crus cerebri forms the posterolateral boundary for interpeduncular fossa. So this is the one of the important spot for you. So this area is known as interpeduncular fossa. So the anterolateral boundaries are formed by optic tract. The posterolateral boundaries are formed by the crus cerebri or crura cerebri, inferiorly by the upper border of pons. So the floor structures are, this is the tuber cinereum. So tuber cinereum of pituitary gland. Then two mammillary bodies. So this is right and left mammillary bodies, and deep to that we can appreciate the posterior perforating substance which is pierced by the branches of posterior cerebral arteries.